So Group B gathered tonight to talk about Skyblue case. We just spent the last few minutes going over what our thoughts were, just like we did for McDonald's. This time though, we've actually kind of gone through it like we did in class. Going to start with part of the Porter's Five Forces, talking about what we think their low and high threats are. We've decided that for entrance, it's a medium threat level. They deregulated the industry, making it far easier for people to enter the market. However, it still requires a lot of capital. I know it cost Jetblue about $160 million. One note to make though is it did only take them 2 weeks to gather that capital, so it could be medium to medium high as far as entrance. Rivalry is of course very high. You've got Southwest Airlines, Allegiant that flies out of here in Fort Wayne is very cheap, and of course your main airlines such as United and all of the rest. So customers have a lot of choices if they feel like the service isn't good enough or if the price isn't good enough. Substitutes we also decided was high, especially considering that a lot of JetBlue's market is here in the U.S. And as we mentioned in class last week, the highway system here makes traveling by car, even across country, a pretty reasonable trip. So that's the biggest chunk of that substitute. Train and boat and ship kind of not being as big of a threat, but still in there. So those are definitely going to be the areas where JetBlue has to be very cognizant of what they've got, and especially with their low-cost strategy. They're going to need to pay a lot of attention to what the rivals are doing and how they're doing it, and making sure that they're staying on top. And they definitely need to watch who's coming into the industry and the market and seeing who they're going to have to compete with. I'll pass it off to Sarah, who's going to wrap up Porter's Five Forces.
Okay, so another one of our forces is going to be our buyers. We feel that the threat of buyers is low. We feel that there are a lot of buyers out there, so if we lose one buyer because our ticket price is too high, there's going to be a million other buyers there waiting to pay that same price. We also feel that the threat of our suppliers is low, even though there's only a few aircraft providers, which would be Airbus and Boeing. Their ability to undercut one another for price is high, so we feel that the threat of suppliers that would make that low.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to spend a moment talking about and discussing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The case didn't really go into too much detail discussing like the culture of JetBlue, but one of the things that we were discussing and we kind of picked up on and reading about the Valentine's Day issue that they had back in 2007, where they delayed flights quite a bit. There was a breakdown in communication. The customers were very upset. But one thing that we sort of saw in that situation, the employees for JetBlue, they really banded together despite that crisis. They were all willing and able to help. The issue was communication. The information systems weren't built out to allow them to really help, but they were definitely willing to provide that help. They wanted to help in whatever way they could. So we really felt that showed that JetBlue had a strong sense of culture within the company. They felt a strong sense of belonging by working for them. Another thing that the case mentioned was there was an attempt to unionize part of JetBlue, but that attempt failed just because they only received 35% of the employees' signatures, so they ended up dismissing that case. That is something they'll need to look into further down the road to make sure they continue to prevent that if they want to maintain that cost leadership. But just those two pieces we felt it worthy to mention. We felt it meant that they did have a strong sense of culture within the company. So I'm going to turn it over to Bryce. He's going to discuss some of the weaknesses we thought they have moving forward.
Thanks, Luke. We talked about weakness. I'm going to talk about weaknesses, but we've also talked about strengths. And some of the strengths that we discussed initially with JetBlue were the fact that JetBlue incorporated a one Airbus strategy, so they utilized the Airbus A320 as a means to keep maintenance costs as well as pilot training, other crew member training down into the minimum, and they leveraged that initially. Throughout the course of several years, they've drifted from that strategy and they started moving towards more of a multi-plane type aspect, and they've seen differences in high utilization start to drop. Employee utilization has actually started to go down. So again, that's one of the weaknesses that we outlined. And then with selecting the Airbus, we noticed in the case that they described purchasing new Airbuses to leverage the fact that for higher fuel efficiency. With those newer fleet of A320 Airbuses, we've noted that the fleet at some point is going to become aging. It's going to be an increase for JetBlue on their maintenance costs as well as any kind of updates to the fleet. So moving forward, we need to make sure that JetBlue takes advantage of trying to incorporate some kind of a strategy to remedy their aging Airbus fleet. And additional weaknesses, I'm going to go ahead and transition over to Narendra.
Thanks, Bryce. Adding to what Bryce already mentioned, more weakness that we can see, like when we look at the strategy that JetBlue was actually pursuing, it's not a competitive strategy, let's say. They didn't have anything remote or anything unique that couldn't be copied by any other airline. So what we could say is the strategies were easy to copy, and then any coming rival or the new entrant could easily copy and then be a competitor and then take that advantage from them that they had. The other one is like the margin of the airlines was not that good because the oil price is quite volatile, rising, and then further lowering the margin. So the impact of the price was great due to the oil prices. So this sums up the weaknesses that they had, even though they had a good chunk of opportunities, threats, and strengths. So looking after all these aspects like Porter's 5 force, Maslow's hierarchy theory, and then a very short analysis, what we can see here in this case is like the industry is competitive, they have a good strong foothold quite as of now, and what is going to be the strategy to pursue in the days to come in order to be maintaining that what they have already achieved. And then if we look from that perspective, I would see like trying to continue with the kind of strategy that they have been doing instead of going away from their strategy that they were already pursuing. I think that's the way forward to look at from this.